Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll wait just a minute to get settled in, and then we'll start officially our new webinar episode. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Naomi Krautzik, and I will be your host and moderator for this session. I'm part of the ECOP Program's training and mentoring task team. And for those of you who are maybe new to the Early Career Ocean Professionals Network, it is a global program, and it has been endorsed by the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And since 2021, ECOP in general has been working to strengthen really voices of early career ocean professionals worldwide, I would say. And that is mainly through fostering collaboration, capacity development, and knowledge exchange across several disciplines and regions. And we have this slogan where we say, our shared goal really is to contribute to this, to building the ocean we want. You know, most of you have seen this big slogan, the ocean we want, and we aim to work towards that. And as part of this effort, we organized this series of webinars that are aimed at training, informing, and maybe even connecting some of the next generation of the ocean professionals. And today's session, episode 41, focuses on supporting coastal marine protected area monitoring with special accessible technology. And in this webinar, we will explore how ProtectedSeas and Marine Monitor, or M2 as you will hear, leverage specific technologies such as radar and camera systems to support effective monitoring in coastal marine protected areas. And very importantly, I think today's session is grounded in real-world applications. So you will have the chance not only to learn what it is, but you will get also insights from users and experts that are using M2, and they will share their experiences and perspectives. So with us, we have Samantha King and Bryant I, who will present the concept of ProtectedSeas and Marine Monitor. And we have also Anastasia Cervantes, Lillie M, and Sohil Rojas, who will present practical examples of these technologies. Before we will begin, we would like to share a very short poll just to get to know you a little bit, where you're joining us from, as one of the questions we usually ask. And give me just 1 second of your time, and we can start this little poll. And I would like to ask you all to just briefly respond to these 3 short questions so we get a chance to get to know you a little bit better. And after that, we will dive immediately into our today's webinar episode. Okay, we have already some answers. It's quite interesting to see most of you are joining us either from Europe or from different regions of the US. And actually, most of you are in the field of conservation and environmental management. Okay, now the responses are changing. Usually most of our audience are students. And this time it seems the topic is so specific that most of you are indeed either in environmental management or active in NGOs, outreach. And in regards to the question of what do you hope to gain from today's webinar, okay, again, quite interesting. So not only do you hope to gain scientific knowledge and maybe even practical tools and methods, but also you would like to get a broader perspective, and career development might be a possibility. You have always the chance to just drop your contacts in the chat and connect with colleagues around the world. Feel free to do so. I will end now the poll. And with that, I would like to remind you once again that, as usual, feel free to, throughout the entire webinar, to use the Q&A section for questions so that the speakers can find your questions easier. We will have time for discussion questions throughout and at the end of the webinar. And I strongly encourage you to take advantage of the presence of our invited speakers today and to ask them as many questions as you can. And now it is my pleasure to hand over the floor to Samantha King, who will introduce ProtectedSeas Marine Monitor and the following speakers afterwards. Floor is yours, Samantha.
Thanks. Just a sec. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Naomi, for moderating. And I also want to thank everyone behind the scenes that are supporting this webinar series. It's really great and really cool to have this opportunity today to share all of our work on your platform. So thank you for that. So my name is Sam King. I am the senior scientist for Marine Monitor at ProtectedSeas. I'll share a little bit more about Marine Monitor and ProtectedSeas in general in just a minute. But since there might be some students watching now or maybe later, I wanted to just share a little bit about my background and how I got to where I am today. So I started working with ProtectedSeas in 2016, and this was part of my master's work in grad school from San Francisco State University. I really focused on marine science, conservation, and geographic information systems, GIS. Prior to that, I had a lot of great experience with GIS in undergrad, working on land use in the Florida Everglades and manatee conservation. And so I'm coming to my current position with you today with a background in conservation, managing threats to species and habitats. And I hope that this webinar gives you a look into some relatively new and definitely interesting technology out there in the world helping support marine protected areas right now. So my colleague, Bryant and I are going to provide an overview of the development of Marine Monitor, which is a nearshore monitoring system, which we'll share more on in a second. But before I dive in, Bryant, do you want to introduce yourself real quick to everyone?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Bryant Erwan. I'm the full stack software engineer for ProtectedSeas, the Marine Monitor team specifically. Just like Sam, I'll share a little bit about how I got into this role. Initially, I was actually studying human biology and went into dental school after college. But the ocean always appealed to me. Always wanted to do something with it. So just in between patients and at nights, I kind of went back to school and learned how to code, and then worked for a health startup, and then eventually found myself in this role. So very happy that ended up working out. And yeah, career pivots are okay if it's something you really love.
Awesome, thanks. So I'll be tossing it over to Bryant a little bit later in our portion of the presentation to talk about some of like the technical stuff and how M2 actually works. So just to kind of start, give you a little bit of a background on ProtectedSeas. We are a very small company based in California in the United States. There are a couple of programs within ProtectedSeas. Two of them are Marine Monitor, but also the ProtectedSeas Navigator, which is a global inventory of marine managed areas. So much data there. I really encourage everyone to check that out at our website if you're interested in learning more about that. But both of these programs have been endorsed as UN Ocean Decade contributions. And so both are making an impact around the world. Okay, what is Marine Monitor, or M2? So it's essentially a vessel monitoring platform. It uses sensors like radar, camera. We also integrate AIS for tracking larger ships, weather sensors, and it uses these sensors to monitor vessel traffic in nearshore marine protected areas. So here you'll see a radar antenna on top of this tower. You may recognize that as the same exact radar antenna that you would purchase if you had a boat. So they're commercially available, relatively low cost, but instead of putting it on a boat to be able to sense your surroundings, we're putting it right next to the water on land to be able to monitor vessel activity in the nearshore area. And so we pair that with a computer system and networking so that we're getting 24/7 continuous data collection from the radar and the camera. Really ideal for nearshore managed areas like coastal MPAs. The system has a range to about 5 to 10 nautical miles, about 10 to 20 kilometers from the site. So it's really ideal for some of these smaller nearshore areas. And sort of like you see in the photo, it's designed to work in remote areas as well, because not every single protected area is right next to a very convenient ranger station or something like that. And so sometimes we have to get a little bit creative using solar power and battery systems to make sure that we can still monitor these remote marine protected areas where they need to be monitored. So Protected Seas, M2, we're the technology provider. So we build and help maintain these systems. And usually what happens when we deploy a site out into the world is that we partner with local organizations that have determined that they can find this technology useful. They want to use it to support their MPA. And you're going to hear a lot of great examples about our partners doing that later in the presentation. But I wanted to give you just a little bit of a zoomed in view of the sites that they work at. We're going to start once we give you the overview of M2, we're going to start in Southern California and we're going to work our way south down to Southern Baja. So you'll get some examples across this area. And if we zoom out, it's not just these systems. We've deployed over 40 systems to 11 countries since 2015. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a high level perspective on the reasoning why we designed M2. If you're familiar with vessel monitoring, vessel tracking, you know that there's a lot of great, rich global data available through the Automatic Identification System, or AIS. It has global coverage, really high resolution. The only problem is that it's primarily commercial vessels like this large cargo ship. And so not really helpful for these sort of smaller scale marine protected areas. So we needed a different solution. These are some larger, maybe industrial type fishing vessels, and there's a lot of really great technology coming online and getting further developed based on satellites. So satellites that capture imagery from space, but still pretty limited on seeing smaller vessels and also being able to track them at high resolution. Usually a satellite will get a picture or two a day, which might not be at the right scale for monitoring these really small protected areas where a fishing vessel may come in just for a few minutes, maybe fish illegally and then leave. And so again, we still need something a little bit different tool to monitor these smaller scale fishing activities. So you can see a really huge difference in the scale from the large ship all the way down to the artisanal small scale fishing. And so M2 is trying to fill that niche of providing an accessible way to monitor some of this smaller scale fishing activities so that users can actually integrate data in the same way that they that they would use AIS into their management, data products, and things like that. And so marine radar kind of sits right in the middle of some more highly advanced systems like satellites, but also provides a lot more rich data than some of your basic tools that might be maybe a little bit more affordable. So cameras positioned on shore, humans using binoculars to monitor. Marine radar falls right in the middle, where it is at a relatively low cost. It's accessible because it's available all around the world. So if we're deploying a site in Mexico, we don't have to ship all of the components from California. The idea is to be able to source things more direct to the communities that are going to use them. Marine radar also provides really high resolution data. We're getting a data point every 2 seconds, which is really, really powerful. And it's also reliable. In the marine environment, it's very challenging to fight against. The ocean is always trying to take your equipment back. Salt water is really destructive, salt in the air. But these radar systems are designed to be on a boat and bounce up and down on boats as they're going through the water. So as far as marine technology goes, it's pretty reliable out there in the field. And I just want to give you a little bit of a look back just to see kind of how we got to where we are now. So, 10 years ago when the system we're just kind of starting up, we're kind of figuring out how to get the sensors to talk to each other, how to get the data packaged and sent to the cloud. This is in Washington State in the United States, very creatively deployed on a tree. Interestingly, this is still online almost 10 years later. Really speaks to, creative solutions. But then we got a little bit more advanced. This system here is on the roof of a marine safety center in Southern California. And so we started thinking about how can we integrate the system into more durable infrastructure. So in this sort of situation, we can plug into power, we can plug into internet, and it's really convenient for users that have this sort of infrastructure on site. But then, we realized that it's not just these convenient locations that need to be monitored, it's also remote spaces. And so we integrated everything into a rugged off-grid trailer with solar panels. And then finally today, we are starting to more frequently integrate with infrastructure that's kind of built to support M2 specifically, and also maybe the local rangers. So this is a pretty remote space. And so now that we've constructed the tower, we also have provided power and internet there on site as well. And we still deploy all these versions of the systems. It really kind of depends what the needs are of the users out in the field. So M2 users come from a couple of different backgrounds. They can be government agencies, MPA managers, enforcement personnel, maybe working to support MPAs or monitor MPAs, NGOs, research institutions, really anyone who's interested in getting high-resolution data on human activity in marine protected areas. So you can come at that interest from a couple different places. And then we also do sell these commercially to users who want to just buy it outright. Other ways we will work with local organizations to try to find grant funding to be able to support the system. And so, like many other programs, Marine Monitor could fall under any number of the Ocean Decade Challenges. But the specific Ocean Decade Challenges that M2 is tied to are Challenge 4, which is to develop a sustainable, resilient, and equitable ocean economy. But also Challenge 9, skills, knowledge, technology, and participation for all. The true heart of Marine Monitor is to support coastal communities so they can get maybe a more detailed monitoring picture of small-scale fishing in their local area. And in this way, they can manage the fishing so that it can be maybe more sustainable, so that they can understand what responses might be needed based on fishing level, where, when that's happening. And so this all will contribute to a more sustainable ocean economy for these communities in their local area. But then at the same time, we've specifically chosen technology that's accessible, that's available, and so that we hope when we deploy these systems out into the world, it's not some high-level technology that's completely not accessible or understandable. It's technology that they might already be used to if they're mariners on the water using radar. But it really is giving technology, data, and data products to these communities as well. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to Bryant. Bryant, if I don't pick up on your slide transitions, just give me a heads up when I should change.
Yep, will do. All right, so hi everybody. To give you an idea of what the hardware looks like for M2. So as you recall, this is one of our stations that was placed on a tower. In this case, it was in Belize. But every M2 will have a radar, a long-range marine-grade camera, and a waterproof control center. And the radar is also waterproof as well too. So it's meant to, weather storms, be resilient. And in terms of the camera, we have examples later on, but it can zoom up to 7 miles for a small vessel. Some users want to target other types of vessels like cargo ships. In that case, it can go up to even 20 miles. And same thing with the radar. It can be set for really far ranges or closer ranges. Next slide, please. All right, so this is an example, a closer look at our what we call mobile marine monitor, or M3. So this is going to be fully remote. That means you don't need power, you don't need internet. We have solar panels for power, Starlink or LTE for internet. And inside that trailer, there's a battery system as well to store that power so it can still run at night. Everything in that trailer is also waterproof, and there's a telescoping mast so you can get a little bit more elevation. Obviously, by putting it on a trailer, we can move it very easily. So some users will take this mobile marine monitor and be able to monitor several MPAs with just one station. So this is starting to get a view of what our viewer looks like. So what our customers, clients will see on our app, whether on a mobile device or on their desktop. A big feature of Marine Monitor is our radar. Radar is very useful because when somebody might be doing something they're not supposed to, they would be turning off their automatic identification system. But we do have that sensor as well. So radars can detect boats without AIS. It can detect really small boats. We've been able to detect people fishing on a surfboard even, or kayaks. So it can detect pretty much anything in the water. And if you look really closely, there's these red, yellow dots. The easiest one to see is on the lower left of your screen. So that is a raw radar sweep image. But we take that data and create targets based off of constant pings from the radar. And that's what the red and yellow and green triangles look like. So those represent boats that the radar has detected. So besides detecting vessels, a big part of M2 is recording all this data. It's not just a live monitoring solution. People can historically look back at data that was recorded. So in this case, this is a vessel that we recorded its entire track line from when our radar first detected the boat to traveling into the MPA, and then now it's loitering and possibly fishing in the MPA. And so that data is taken to our camera, the marine grade long range camera, and that camera can pan, tilt, zoom 360 degrees, up and down 90. So it can look straight down, look straight up. And it can, again, zoom really far distances to actually capture pictures of that boat. And because we know exactly where that boat is, we can also know and record this picture was taken at this exact location. So in this case, we have a picture of a vessel, quite small, and again, its entire track line entering the MPA and staying in the MPA. This is a more zoomed out view of our desktop and mobile viewer. So again, this is something that our customers, law enforcement agents can get access to. The public can also request access as well too. But this is a convenient way to look at all of our data, whether it's live or historical, on their computer and mobile phone. Yeah, hopefully that gives you a good idea about Marine Monitor. We can take any questions now. I see some in the chat already.
Yes.
So for the name of the camera system, so Marine Monitor, one of our goals is to make things, easily fixable, so we can work with pretty much any camera system that supports OnViv, which most camera systems do. We use FLIR quite a lot, Axis as well, and Kohu. But yeah, any camera that can pan, tilt, zoom, and has OnViv is supported.
Thank you so much, Samantha and Brian, both for your overview. There are already 2 questions in the Q&A. So we have one from Connor who asks, how do you establish which local organizations to work with? Is it tied to certain metrics or those which you may have connections with? How do you select usually?
Yeah, usually we are, kind of sometimes just connected organically with our local partners. Usually they approach us because they've identified that they would like to monitor small scale vessels, that there really isn't another way to do at the same sort of resolution 24/7. And so they'll usually come to us to learn more information. And then at that point, because we can really kind of what Bryant spoke to, we can really design the system based on the local need. So that way we're not like over designing the system or making it way more expensive than it needs to be, making sure we can meet the needs of what they're looking for on the ground in the field. And so then we'll kind of have a back and forth and work together to find out and budget the best solution that's going to work. And then as you'll see with our partners here after this on the webinar, usually when there's one system that's been deployed with one of our local partners, it usually starts to stem more because there's a clear value, and especially when the data starts coming in and you start seeing what you might be able to do with the data and do with the system. And so that is really a common way that people come to have an M2 system, is that they either are part of an organization that either already has one or has been, connected or gotten maybe have been connected with us, knowing that it might be a good fit for what they need.
And there is another one. What are the key limitations of current MPA monitoring?
I can take that one. I think the biggest limitation is always going to be law enforcement at the end of the day. Everything that we do or any other technology company does is going to be limited on whether somebody's actually going to do anything about it. But our technology solutions can help agencies, especially with limited resources, know where to deploy their enforcement agents as efficiently as possible. So if somebody is loitering in an MPA with Marine Monitor, they can get a text or email alert, showing, hey, there's potentially somebody going into this MPA. Here's a picture of them, and then they can decide whether it's worth deploying agents there. Sometimes, these MPAs take, hours or a long, way to get to. So it's really important to not, waste resources going and not either knowing where they are or knowing if they've already left. And then I think there's further limitations beyond enforcement. So the technology is definitely something we're all still trying to figure out. So Sam alluded to that slide, how marine radar is kind of in the middle in terms of costs and being able to see everything. And satellite was one of the featured solutions. But currently, there's really no good resolution for very onshore vessels with satellite. There's optical, but it needs to be on a clear day. And a lot of satellites are just not at a point where it's really near time. It could be like every other day, every 3 days. Like they'd be scanning the entire globe, and you can get an update every hour, but not necessarily exactly where you want. And at the end of the day, yes, there is lots of IUU fishing, very offshore, but there's also lots of illegal onshore, or, less offshore fishing that's happening as well too. So I think you need a network of technology solutions for monitoring.
Thank you so much. Oh, I think we have one more in the chat, actually. So this is from Anna from Belgium. She would like to ask, how does M2 integrate multiple data streams, so radar, AIS, optical systems, into one monitoring framework?
Yeah. So,
So
okay, go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss this to you. I just wanted to start with one kind of point that I think is really central to this. If anyone is familiar with AIS, it's been used for conservation and research for a while now. And so our system is sort of built to the data outputs are very similar to AIS. So they can be completely integrated with AIS so that people who are used to working with AIS already kind of are familiar with what the data are going to look like. So that was kind of the how we thought about it, planning it to make it most accessible. And yeah, Brian, if you want to share anything else, please do.
Yeah, it might be useful if you can go back one slide to see our viewer again. Perfect. Yeah, so everything that we record, whether it's a radar track or an AIS track, will show up in our viewer. There's some code behind the scenes to, if we're confident that a radar track and an AIS track is the same, to combine the two. And then again, because we know the exact location of this vessel, whether it's from AIS or radar, and then we send that to the camera to take a picture of it, we know exactly where any photo is pointing to. So if we take a look at the photo of this vessel here and we look at the metadata, we can then later look and see it was pointed at this coordinate for a boat going at this speed, this course, this heading, all kinds of other data.
Wow, we have another question. Should we take this one? Should we go over to the applications?
I can address this one really quick while we're kind of in the technical details.
Yeah, please.
From the chat, can data from the radar be assimilated into numerical model output? So the answer is yes. So we actually take the tracking data. So that's the data that Bryant mentioned, latitude, longitude, position, the course, the speed, all of the little data points that fall along this track line. And we actually use that data to feed machine learning models that help. We score tracks based on confidence because marine radar can be kind of noisy sometimes. In development right now, we're also using that data to predict what a vessel might be doing, what activities, maybe whether they're fishing or not. That way you don't necessarily have to pull up the photos, pull up the track line to be able to get a quick idea of what's happening. You could get a text that says, hey, there might be fishing happening in the MPA right now. Maybe log in and check it out. The radar picture itself, that red, yellow picture, that is being used by the radar tracker within their modeling environment to track these positions over time. But we're also saving those pictures as well. We haven't applied any modeling to the imagery. Our primary use of it is to display it like it is here on the map. And then also provide it in case packages for cases against poaching and MPAs. But there's certainly a lot of data sitting there in these radar images where you could potentially get a lot of other interesting information from as well.
Okay, maybe you could then connect it even to the question in the Q&A, because there somebody asked if the data are shared with local authorities or maybe NGOs or even researchers.
Yes, yeah. So Brian alluded to it. The viewer that we're looking at right now, it doesn't require any software. So it's just a website that you have credentials to. So if you have been approved by our site partners for access to the data, you just log on, sign in with your approved credentials, and you have access to alerts. You have access to the mobile viewer. You have access to downloading all of the historical data. And so usually what happens is our local partners will send this sort of access information out to the partners they really want to have access to, whether that's enforcement, researchers, other sort of managers. And we can also kind of manage access top level as well. So if we just want to give, maybe a citizen scientist, a viewer, just so that they can view, but we want to give an enforcement person maybe complete access to all of the background data. We also have that ability too. We just want to make it as accessible and easy to access as possible.
Oh, that is amazing. Do you think now would be a good time to go over to the next presentations and then have another set of Q&A at the end, or should we continue with questions here?
I think we could probably move on. I do see another question in the chat, but at this point, we're going to move and let some of our partners talk about the incredible work they're doing. And so then, like Naomi just mentioned, we'll go back and have just an open Q&A where you can ask any of us anything at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
So yeah, with that, we can go over to our next three presentations with applications that were mentioned already. And we'll start with Anastasia Cervantes. I will give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. I really liked that Sam and Bryant gave a little background about how they got to the really cool spots that they're in. So I'll do the same. I kind of like Bryant started studying human biology in college and was planning on going to medical school, but I found myself just continually really drawn to the more ecology and community ecology and environmental science side of things. So I ended up transitioning and going into an environmental science graduate degree and focused a lot on marine spatial planning and GIS work and remote sensing. So I was actually hired during graduate school part-time to come over and start doing a little bit of marine monitor work for the organization that I currently work for. So I've been actually, this is the one project that I've been doing the longest in my current role. So I am a data scientist at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. It's a nonprofit that does a lot of different marine science and conservation work. We're located in California, but we work mostly in California, but broadly outside of California as well. I sit at the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary office. So that's a NOAA National Marine Sanctuary. So I have a federal affiliation, but I do work mostly under my nonprofit hat. Yeah. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so within larger California-wide marine protected area network, I sit in the Santa Barbara Channel. So this little box you can see, the big call out map. I work in this general area. Santa Barbara area and larger California has a really complex network of no-take marine reserves, as well as marine conservation areas. Our location is super interesting to me because we support the management of both mainland and offshore marine protected areas. So you can see the Channel Islands are the four little islands that are off the coast of Santa Barbara and Ventura. These islands, they're also part of the National Marine Sanctuary System, so they've got a couple different levels of protection, those marine protected areas, and then also the larger National Marine Sanctuary. There are currently 3 active sites, M2 sites in the Santa Barbara Channel. There's 2 mainland sites, one at Coal Oil Point and one at Point Conception. And then there's also an offshore site that's currently active at Anastasia Island. As a data scientist, one of my main conservation goals that I support using M2 is to help the wardens enforce MPAs. This can be pretty challenging for the MPAs at the Channel Islands because, as you can tell, they're far away from the mainland and it's pretty hard to get to them for the wardens. So one way that M2 really helps with this is allowing the wardens to go log on to the viewer like Sam and Bryant were talking about. They can see how busy it is at a MPA. They can also decide if it's worth the time, energy, and effort. And honestly, these days, boat fuel costs too to go patrol that particular MPA. So I also have a couple non-enforcement related goals. So besides that enforcement component, which Lillie, the next presenter, is going to talk a little bit more about than I will, one of my main conservation goals is better understanding human use in and around these MPAs. M2, kind of like Sam mentioned before, fills a really important data gap because most of the smaller boats don't transmit AIS information, or if you're not familiar with that, it's automatic identification system information. So that's all like the constant vessel positioning that larger vessels are mandatory. They have to have that. So we have a lot of ocean users out, especially out at the Channel Islands, that have pretty much, we don't have a way of tracking them. It's a huge data gap for both the marine protected areas and the National Marine Sanctuary System. And M2 really helps address this by tracking just all vessels within that 5 nautical mile range. So typically what I found at the Anastasia site is we only see about 50% of vessels transmitting AIS, and that's a really, really rough estimate. So without M2, we're basically not tracking 50% or half of the vessel activity that's happening out at just that one spot at the Channel Islands. And so the final goal that I'm going to talk about is pretty similar to the previous one, but just to better understand more at a fine scale level, the different patterns of use at each MPA for which we have an M2 system. Okay, so this is kind of going back to my first conservation goal, the MPA enforcement. I create monthly data products to identify patterns of violations and kind of outline areas of concentrated activity. And then I share these with our local enforcement wardens, pretty much on a monthly cadence. When there are violations, we provide pretty detailed track information on vessel position and share pictures in order to provide multiple streams of evidence for our wardens. Ultimately, at the sites that I manage in Santa Barbara, especially the mainland sites, so Coal Oil Point, this one, and Point Conception, they really have a super high level of compliance. We don't really see that many violations at these sites. At this particular site that I'm showing, Coal Oil Point, we are often able to highlight the benefit of marine protected areas through behavior we call fishing the line activity, where fishers, mostly within the lobster fishing community, they lay their lobster pots around the edge of the MPA. And this is really cool because it really well illustrates the idea of spillover of really high biomass from within the MPA to the outside surrounding areas. Okay, so another really interesting finding from working on this project for almost 5 years now is that we are pretty good at being able to discern different types of fishing activity just based on what the vessel track looks like. This is, again, especially apparent at Coal Oil Point, which is going to be my case study site for this presentation. In the last slide, I talked about the fishing line activity, most notable in the lobster fishery. That's in blue. You can see other ones that we've highlighted here. Additionally, there's spot prawn in green. They have kind of a funny little looping behavior that happens in a little bit deeper water. We see that pretty typically at the southwest corner of this marine protected area. And then we also see trawl tracks in purple, and those are kind of heading towards the right bottom corner of the reserve. And I think understanding fishing type just by track line is a super interesting and important feature of conservation and really allows us to better understand how fisheries are utilizing each of these different MPAs. So additionally, it's really important to understand how the spatial and temporal dynamics of an MPA change throughout the year. So you can see in this animation, fishing activity is definitely not evenly distributed across MPAs, and certain times of the year results in increased pressure in different locations, and that changes a lot. So M2 is really critical in helping us understand our local MPAs better and really does support multiple of my conservation goals. This is helping me better understand the social dimensions of coastal use and access by fishers and recreators, and pretty clearly illustrates fishing seasons, which can then help enforcement wardens plan their patrols accordingly. Lobster season runs from October through March and is really clearly illustrated in this animation as well. So we can, highlight that for the MPA and wardens who are enforcing it, and they can make adjustments to their patrol planning. And finally, I mostly use M2 to examine fishing activity. M2 doesn't discriminate and collects position on all ocean users that are within its range. So each M2 system, like Sam mentioned, has a camera on board that can capture images of vessels moving through the MPA. This is really interesting and important information to understand how all different types of ocean users use MPAs, kind of regardless of their activity, fishing or not. Helps us ask and answer questions like how often are commercial fishing boats using this MPA compared to casual recreators or casual fishers. It allows me to see who's using the marine protected areas and entering the National Marine Sanctuary, sailboats, kelp cutters, different service vessels, and kayakers. All of these folks are using marine protected areas, and they're all having an impact on the MPA, and it's important to really be able to understand who's using the MPA and how. And that's all I have. So I think we'll probably catch up on time and be able to get to everybody's questions. But I think before questions, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Lillie.
Thanks, Anastasia. I will share my presentation. And hello, everyone. My name is Lillie Mulligan, and I work at the nonprofit Wild Coast, Costa Salvaje. And today I'll be talking about our use case down in San Diego, Southern California. So first, an introduction to who Wild Coast is. We are a nonprofit based out of California and Mexico, and our mission is to conserve coastal marine ecosystems and address climate change through natural solutions. And I'll give you a little overview of what that looks like for Wild Coast. So we establish and manage protected areas, protect and restore blue carbon ecosystems, and have a lot of partnerships with local communities, governments, and the private sector. And our work with Marine Monitor helps carry out 2 of those pillars. So an idea of where these projects are taking place, I'm based out of San Diego and work through all of the marine protected areas. There are 124 in California, 11 of them are based out of San Diego, and then we have a network of projects going on throughout Mexico. Just to give you an idea, that includes wetlands and mangroves, marine debris, helping stop waste from entering the ocean in Tijuana. We work on sea turtle nesting beaches, wildlands, helping buy land to prevent development, working on coral reefs. And then that brings us back to San Diego, where our work on M2 happens. So we host 3 different radars. And the first northern site is at the Swamis State Marine Conservation Area. And then we have one on the Scripps Pier, which is a research pier that covers 2 different marine protected areas. So one that's a SMCA, or a State Marine Conservation Area, and one that's a State Marine Reserve. So you can see there are different levels of restrictions and regulations for different MPAs. And then we have another one further south, the South La Jolla radar, and that one's a little tricky. We're hosting it on a new home soon, but this gives an idea of 3 different areas a radar could be installed. So we have property that belongs to the city of Encinitas, a lifeguard tower. We have the private Scripps Pier, and then private properties in La Jolla. And how Wild Coast plays a role in the management of these radars. The first is maintenance. So sometimes that looks like me actually hosing bird poop off of our radars. Or I'm on the phone with Sam, who you met earlier, and she's telling me what buttons I need to press to maintain the radars. And then, lucky for me, I get to go out on a boat, and I do a few research projects while we're out at sea, but one of them is ground truthing the radars. So we have pulled up, you can see I'm pointing at a boat, and my colleague is looking at the radar image on our iPad. And so we're ground truthing, basically seeing the coordinates of the vessel in the water match what the radar is seeing. Similarly, when a radar is first installed, we go around with our vessel and basically trace the boundaries of the MPA to make sure that what the radar is seeing is accurate to our coordinates in the water. And then, as Anastasia mentioned, we do a lot of partnerships with enforcement and legal agencies. So that typically looks like the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, known as CDFW, California State Parks, and the City of San Diego. So the first part is training them all on how to use M2. So that looks like usually about once a year. There are different groups within these agencies. So, we have the state parks peace officers up at Swamis that once a year we get them onboarded to understand how to use the radar, making sure they have access, that password protected website, making sure they're signed up to get notifications on their phone. And then it also helps to provide confidence in writing citations. We've heard from partners like state parks and CDFW that sometimes they're not sure if a vessel is actually in the marine protected area, if they're in their lifeguard tower. And so by having the radar really easy, accessible, they are able to ensure that the vessel is actually inside of the marine protected area before wasting, gas getting out there, which is getting more expensive. And they do have a limited capacity in how often they can go out and how many wardens are able to be out on the water. And so providing this confidence really does make a difference. And they've kind of shown that to us over the years that it's really invaluable data for them. And then similar to Anastasia, I create data analysis reports once a month. So after this, for the next few days, I'll be analyzing the data from March and sending that to enforcement partners, and I'll show what my reports look like in a second. And with that, we help inform data-driven patrols. So similarly to what I mentioned before, making sure that before a warden goes out and spends fuel and time on the water, they know that they're likely to encounter a vessel potentially fishing illegally. So, for example, I'll be doing my data analysis and find that on Fridays from 9 to 12 is the most common time for potential illegal fishing in a certain MPA on the northwest corner. We get it so detailed that these wardens and peace officers really understand where they should be putting their resources. And then finally, which kind of brings in the city of San Diego, are case packages. And I'll show that in a second. That's where we really work with Protected Seas on when there are particular vessels that people are, asking us to present to them. We're able to collect that data and present it to them that they can use in court for prosecutions. So looking at what our monthly reports look like, you can see that on the left we have potentially legal behavior, and we always say potential, right? I'm not enforcement agency, so these vessels might be fishing in an area that's legal, but they might not have the right licenses on board. They might be catching fish that are under the size limit. So they're legal in terms of where they're fishing, which I think is an important thing to decipher. So you can see, similar to what Anastasia finds, in the pink I have the lobster vessels that fish the line. And we love to see this because it really is proving that MPAs are working, because anglers, fishermen, are fishing where they know there will be more resources, and those are on the boundaries of the MPAs due to the spillover effect. And then we include pictures even of vessels fishing potentially illegally, because it really shows the potential of the radar. And I think it makes enforcement agencies more excited to know that they could get these pictures of when a vessel is fishing potentially illegally. So then on the right, you see the same MPA, the same month. This was just last month in February. We have other months like June last year, there were 40 vessels, or 2 years ago, 40 vessels potentially fishing illegally in South La Jolla. But I chose to include one that's, less dramatic, but very present and recent. So you can see just last month, or 2 months ago now, we had 2 vessels potentially fishing illegally that we have photos of, and if a warden were really concerned about those vessels, we would then send them what a case package looks like. And so this is where a big partnership comes in with Protected Seas and Wild Coast to create these packages. So a warden, a district attorney will reach out and request more specific data on these vessels. And so we're able to show everything you see here. So vessel detection, the images, which are captured very frequently. And so we can show, at the top that they were fishing outside of the MPA and then come in and spend quite a while within that marine protected area. So we're able to show photos, how long they were there, their speed, how far into the MPA they were. Was it just they were fishing the line and kind of migrated in a little bit, or was it more, egregious right in the middle of the marine protected area? And so with that, we're really able to give the enforcement agencies and, in court prosecutions, the data they need to carry out that prosecution. A challenge with enforcing these MPAs, that was a question brought up earlier, is that often wardens have to see the activity with their own eyes in order to write a citation. And so there's not much we can change about that. We're working on it. But what's helpful is that they see it with their own eyes. They have their spotting scopes, their binoculars, and they're recording that with videos. But once it goes to court, they're able to show we have actual data where you were fishing potentially illegally. And that's really hard to deny in court. An angler can't exactly say, no, that wasn't me, because we have pictures and it's really clear that the vessel was there, even without their AIS being turned on, because we often see them turning it off when they enter the marine protected area. And so that is how Wild Coast works with Marine Monitor. It's a really incredible program that has so much potential that we've tapped into, and there's even more ahead of us. So with that, we'll answer questions after, but I will pass it off to another colleague, Zotil, to present her work with M2.
Great. Thank you. That was amazing. Being able to see that someone is actually caught and processed. So we'll have to get there sometime. In the meantime, I'll share you my screen. And thank you for being here all the way. We're going kind of south now for the Mexican Northwest MPA surveillance. My name is Xochitl Rojas. I'm an oceanographer. I work with data, and I work in Pronatura Noroeste. It's also a nonprofit. And wait, can you see the next one? Yeah. So we're a nonprofit. We've been here around for about 35 years. I guess we share missions. It's all about conservation flora and fauna and promote development of social areas. We do not operate directly the system. We partner with local communities, government agencies, other national and international NGOs, research institutes, and we can see now here the land cover we kind of try to cover and the marine cover area. It's a huge area. So we've been working with ProtectedSeas since 2018. It's been now 8 years, I guess. So the first one was Stanley Cabo Pulmo, and then we haven't stopped since then. Right now we have 5 complete systems installed, and one is ready to be deployed in about 2 or 3 weeks. 3 of them are continental. Those are the yellow spots. 3 of them are island, and 3 of them are between MPAs. So you can see the MPAs here are the blue little polygons. So, well, little, by saying so, I mean some of our MPAs are very big. So that's challenging, and that's how M2 system is helping us. So as I told you, it's operated by local communities or governments. For example, San Basilio, San Cosme, and El Partito are operated completely by local communities. And so, well, our ProNatura surveillance program focuses mainly in illegal fishing. So whether it's inside MPAs, or someone is using prohibited fishing gear, or someone is fishing licensing by species, or I mean, they are catching some species that are not allowed to get. So by solving the issue of who gets inside the MPA, we can caught the bad guys and confirm the fishing gear and or if they got protected species with them. So this M2 picture shows very clear this type of track. We've already seen that, which is in tourism because there's nothing interesting around there. And it's definitely not a vessel in simple transit through the park. So it will be probably about fishing, which in this particular park is not allowed at all. The pics on the right are actually real boats that were caught thanks to the M2 system surveillance. This is the most common type of vessel that we can find in this area, besides yachts. They are very small fiberglass boats, around 25 feet long, with no mandatory IA signal. So detecting them with the radar is being very helpful because satellite options are out of the question here. I found a perfect scenario for you to illustrate that, what I just said. Here we have our second most remote place in Mexico. It's called Islas Marias Island. I don't know. If it used to be a jail for over centuries, so believe me when I say it's remote and it's very well preserved. So it's 4 islands in total. It was designated Biosphere Reserve by UNESCO in 2010. And in this particular MPA, all fishing is prohibited, commercial and touristic also. It's very far. It's around 60 miles far from the continent, but the city from which they actually embark, it's actually 105 miles, which is the city that I'm pointing to, called Mazatlan. And it's as big as the MPA is as big as 1.5 million acre. So having rangers, law enforcement, fuel, food, whatever you want to get there becomes interesting, actually. One of our best days in our lives was this particular morning. This is like a case study. Some ranger at the office was making what we call a desk surveillance trip and caught up a very suspicious track. So the track is the picture in your right. After confirming with the camera that it was actually a boat and that it had been there for around 2 hours, it was interesting enough to go and have a look. Now, this MPA has another very special condition. Not all of them has them in this country, in which rangers are in immediate communication with law enforcement, and law enforcement is ready to go out. As soon as they knew, it was just about minutes that they were on the chase. So here we have the illegal fishing boat we saw. And then I know it's far, but by now we already are able to identify which is our boats and how they look like this far. And so long story short, there was not only one boat, but two, and they were found with some fish, and they could not explain the legal origin of it. So they had to come back to the ranger station and start some legal proceedings. So by now, you must imagine how useful this system has been for us. It has helped us to better plan surveillance routes, not just going all around the park, which would be basically impossible because of the size. We can now use tracks as real evidence of fishing inside the MPA that my colleagues have also mentioned. We know where they are fishing, when, how much time are they spending, what kind of vessels are there, and I mean, fishing behaviors in general. And we found out that the M2 system is very intuitive and easy to learn. So therefore, involving local authorities and the community becomes easier for them. If they can just go log in and check themselves what's going on any day, then it's going to be easier for them to get involved and help to get this done. That was it. I tried to be as fast as I could. Thank you so much. We partner a lot with Global Conservation, CONAMP, which is the MPA manager, SEMART, and CONAPESCA are the law enforcement authorities. Very important, in Mexico, we have the manager of the MPA that is not precisely the legal law enforcement that is going to take place and do the legal stuff. So thank you again. You can follow us. You can click and take a picture of the QR code to know that what we're doing, or you can just contact me. Thank you.
Wow, thank you all for your presentations. I mean, all these applications sounded not only super interesting, but really important in these areas you mentioned. And I think that shows because we have lots of questions. If you're up to it, we could go ahead and go through them. Some of them even are specifically addressed to specific speakers. For example, there's one for Anastasia, where Anna is asking, have you observed changes in compliance or illegal activities since deploying the system?
Yeah, and I'm sure other folks can speak to this as well. For the specific sites that I have looked at, we've just had really high compliance at Coal Oil Point and Point Conception, and there's an element of that could absolutely be due to just, if people know that there are ramifications and there's evidence that can, show that they've been fishing in a marine protected area, they're probably less likely to do it. So at those two sites, it's hard to say that there's been a decrease in illegal fishing activity just because we started out with such good compliance in the beginning. And at Anacapa Island, that one's going to be a really interesting one to track. I have a feeling that will happen, but I can't say yet because we only have had it operational for a couple months in total, almost a year, but we haven't been able to really hone in and look at that data and see if there's been a significant or noticeable decline in illegal fishing activity. But I'd be interested to hear from folks at the other sites if that's happened for them.
I would say it's hard to attribute why behaviors change. We have noticed that after a big case that is, then in the news, a lot of press releases about, let's say, a commercial party fishing vessel. So that's when people pay to go on a vessel for a day and the captain takes them around fishing. So we had a case up in Swamis, and once that got on the news, we did see a little bit of a decrease in illegal fishing, but it is hard to say. I can't say with 100% confidence that that's why the behavior changed. But I think similar to a traffic a stop sign camera. I think when you know you're being watched, you are more inclined to, conduct legal behavior. But again, hard to confirm that that's why behavior changes.
Yeah, same answer here. We don't really know by now because we didn't have prior cases to compare to. But by the local community, they've told us they know now that the radar is around and they just kind of stop going where they used to or something just by talking to them.
Yeah, I mean, that on its own, it's amazing already. So should we try to go through, or maybe we can combine some of those. So there's one question, maybe that's more for Samantha and Brian from the beginning still, that was about the cost. So one in the chat from Todd said, what would be an off-grid set cost range look like, ballpark, with no power to connect to? And then there's another one in the Q&A that says, can you provide an approximate cost for installation and annual maintenance? Maybe you can address both of them.
Yeah, so to the first question about in the scenario where there's no power, there's no internet, maybe we need to have the off-grid system there that maybe doesn't exist yet. That can usually be around 200,000 US dollars. And then we include support for a few years after that. So it is, even though that is the high end of kind of how it goes, there's a lot included with that. Training, making sure that you're supported. We definitely never want to just drop these out into the world without making sure that our partners, the users, a lot of times, we'll have a great relationship with our partners, but we'll also work directly with enforcement as well, if they need a little bit more support from us. Things just kind of come down lower in cost from there. In the sort of system like I showed, where if it maybe can be easily integrated on top of a building, we can even just kind of set it on the roof. Those can come down more, a lot closer to like 100,000 US dollars. And that is also if you want to purchase it outright. We do also have a small grant program where we might be able to reinvest funds, or basically we have a long list of sites that we've identified that would be a really great fit for the system. And maybe when we've had enough commercial sales, or we can find partners that are all interested in the same area, we can bring together those funders to help support a sort of system like that.
Great, thank you. There's another one that is maybe again for all three applications, I would say, because there might be differences. And it's a question again from Anna. What lessons learned would you prioritize for new regions considering adoption? Maybe some of the newer sites have a response for that.
I could just mention we did being a nonprofit that's international, half our team being in Mexico. Just last year, we went to a very remote site to see if we could install a radar there. There's a lot of illegal fishing that happens. And, unfortunately, we just realized you can't drive cars. And so to install even the M3, the mobile marine monitor, sometimes it's just not possible in really remote areas. So I think that's a lesson learned of like, you really need to know the area before potentially looking into installing one there, which of course I wish we could drop a helicopter to drop the radar there, but there are just some sites that it's not quite possible. But it's important to be familiar with your site to understand that. But there are a lot of sites like you saw, the big tower or the mobile marine monitor that do work. And I think that's really exciting in these remote areas.
I was just, while Lily was saying that, it strikes me too, just between the three sites that I look at, we have one I mentioned that's really remote and it is hard to get to, and that's been a challenge for maintenance and a variety of other things. But I think across all three sites, the main thing that makes a site successful is having enforcement personnel that are able and willing and excited to support the site and utilize the technology. I think that's, like a lot of people that are in the enforcement community, they have so much on their plate that it's really hard to then also get familiar with new technology and like integrate that into the way that they patrol. Um, so I think having either a network of people, like Lily and I kind of operate as data liaisons for the enforcement personnel that we partner with. And so that's been a really important lesson learned, that you really have to have those good connections, both with a organization or community member that's interested in the data, and then also enforcement people that are willing to, take input from those data managers and integrate it into their systems, because it is different than how they normally operate. So I think that might be the biggest lesson learned that I take away going from, a operational site to exploring new sites, is do we have people that are excited and interested and willing to utilize it?
Yeah, I think the site you're referring to, Anastasia, was Anacapa, right? Yeah, so I was involved in the Anacapa installation, and that was very difficult. We needed a crane to lift it off a moving boat, and then in that island, there's no cars, right? So we had to haul it with a tractor. But then, it was also difficult to maintain when there were storms. But despite all of those challenges, we still put in effort to keep it up and running because there's strong interest in it. So I think that's a very good point. Like, it's going to be challenging, especially in these remote locations, and things may break, storms might happen, lightning strikes might happen. But if there's, really strong interest and effort on everybody's parts, then we can all still keep it running.
I would just add that you need maintenance in your budget and in your mind, because there will be maintenance. I mean, you can just go ahead. So there will be transportation of someone to that place. That will be a boat, a plane, or someone there. And there will also will be a team that need to be ready to go. I mean, not ready at the moment, but need to have some time every couple months to go and check and connect and unplug things. So there will be someone needed that has this availability to go, that wanted to go. And some cables may be purchased, but also some other bigger things may have to be purchased again. It's not often, but you cannot just get a lot of money, put one, and then forget about it. You must have some budget to keep going, because the data is going to be good. You want it, and you cannot be stopped by not thinking about the future and the next maintenance. So, yeah.
Naomi, I think you're on mute.
Oops, sorry about that. Thank you, Samantha. So, yeah, I think that connects quite nicely with another question, and that is about if there are challenges in implementing the M2, either because of technical or logistical issues, because you mentioned already several logistical restraints, or maybe because there are resistance from the local community or the governance. Have you had such issues?
Um, I feel like a lot of that was covered, but we see this, we see the same things from our side of things as well, as far as making sure there's support for maintenance, for just general interest in the data that's coming in. But that finding location on land is one of the most difficult parts of this. You know, we're focused on the ocean, we're focused on monitoring vessels, but this has to be based on land. It's a physical system. And so that has actually become one of the most challenging parts of siting, you know, even if there's like kind of like Lillie was speaking to, like there's so much interest in this one site. How are we going to make it work? Sometimes it's just not going to be the right answer. A different technology might be the answer. But also, I mean, I have worked with social for, you know, years trying to identify, like we know that it's going to be there, but how do we get it there? And how do we make sure we have all of the things in place to make sure that it's successful when it's finally deployed? Some of these are a years long process, but it really speaks to it needs to be right. And it's worth taking the time ahead of time to make sure that we don't put the system out in the world and then it's not going to be used, because, you know, all of us would be disappointed in that sort of outcome. And so sometimes it does move really fast if everything falls into place perfect, but a lot of times it takes a lot of effort to make sure that it's right, and then to make sure that everything's in place for it to be successful.
And there's another question in the Q&A. Do you have also experience with monitoring underwater cultural heritage sites? I mean, maybe it's a different topic, but...
I'm not sure that any of our existing sites specifically monitor that. There has been interest in monitoring and protecting historical wrecks that are on the floor of the ocean that maybe aren't allowed to be fished, or aren't allowed to be not allowed to take things from them for, you know, for some reason they're being monitored around and managed. And so there has been some interest in using a system to look at vessel activity in the area to better understand that. But we don't have any systems right now that can come to mind that are specifically focused on that sort of application.
Yeah, I would
There
add that
was
there's sometimes overlap. Some marine protected areas are, you know, cultural heritage sites, like our Matlahul State Marine Reserve is a Kumeyaay underwater reserve burial ground. So there is overlap. That wasn't the main intention of the Marine Monitor being installed there, but we are monitoring the fishing behavior on top of that heritage site.
not exactly that use case, but speaking of underwater, there was a station that we equipped hydrophones with to detect blast fishing. That was only one station, one station though, but hopefully there might be some future testing that we'll do for that as well.
And now we have a totally different question from Georgios. And he asks, what skills should ECRs have in order to work in this field? Are there any internships?
I'll say that we're hiring for an intern right now. I could drop the link in the chat for that internship. You have to be based in San Diego. But great timing to ask that question, as it's rare we're hiring. But I will drop that link, and those interns do support our project. So I'll find that link now and put it in the chat.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm sure everybody can kind of give their own 2 cents, but I know for me, the skill specifically that brought me into this role was GIS. So I had a background in ArcGIS and QGIS, and that was one main skill set that, you know, allowed me to apply for this particular role and then develop further. I do a lot of spatial science. So there's so many ways to get into each of these fields, and I'm sure each one of these panelists has their own unique pathway that, you know, brought them with their own unique skill sets. So I wouldn't say that that's the only way to get to into this field, but it's one that I really love and continue to use to this day. So I always think it's worth plugging your spatial analysis skills.
Yeah, and I had kind of mentioned that near the beginning about I had a similar sort of trajectory. One of the great things about GIS and really anything, coding, whatever your primary skill is, being open and adaptable to applying it in different ways. Back when I was in undergrad, looking at aerial photography of the Everglades for days and days and days on end, I learned a lot, but I always knew that I wanted to work in the marine space. And so I was building the GIS skills for me, that I could eventually maybe kind of pivot. And so I kind of came at it from a similar perspective of trying to develop a skill so that I could eventually apply it to the field that I wanted to do it in.
So I would just add to all this, maybe soft skills, maybe being patient, being adaptable, like Samantha said, and things are not always happening in the time you want it, whether it's technical, whether it's someone and the camera is not working, you have to get it back. But in the end, as I told you before, the data is very important. It's very interesting data, so it's worth it to be patient and try again. It's not for everyone, I guess, to be waiting for someone to answer you and then for the shipping. And in our case, we buy some of the stuff, some of the things here, but some others are shipped and imported. So we have to wait. So our lines in waiting, it's unpredictable. It depends on the government and also in permit. We get the permits very easily, but we have to have it. So we do the things the right way. So we have to adapt and then wait. When everything is ready, sometimes the authorities change, and the ones you plead and you said they were going to get into, they change. There's another person now in that position. Have to again try to convince that person it is worth it. So I would just add soft skills at this.
I completely agree with that. And it's kind of the concept of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, where you have to be very patient and meet the enforcement agencies where they are. I can't go in and say, you have to use this equipment because I don't have the authority to tell them that. But if I can show them how useful it is, then someone in a leadership position can start to make it required for their team, which we just saw last year. And we saw logins increase by like 140% because we really got one person on board. And with that, kind of created a snowball effect of getting more people to use the software.
Leadership changes too. So, that's another part of being patient and being optimistic and ready to adapt, because the situation may change, also for the better, not always for the worse.
Yeah, it really seems like it's a growing field, right? And technology is developing. It seems like in the future there might be more and more applications. So it's definitely something to be staying engaged with and to try to keep a tab on the developments. Therefore, I would again encourage every one of you to have a look at the links that are in the chat, especially the one that Lillie just posted here about the internship, since you are interested in it. And I would like to thank you all, everyone who came to listen to our speakers, but above all, I would like to thank our speakers for the insightful presentations, not only their time, but also their expertise. And as, let's say, the last message of today, I would point out that I think this session really highlighted how accessible and integrated technologies can play a crucial role in marine conservation monitoring, and particularly in marine protected areas. So for students and early career professionals, Since it's an evolving field, there might be growing opportunities in the future. Keep in touch, follow up via LinkedIn or the web pages that you can find in the chat. And if you want to have another look, you can find this webinar recording in the next days, either on the ECOP webinar website or our YouTube channel. I will paste those links as well in the chat. And with that, I will give you again the opportunity to say some last words if you want. We're exactly at the timing here, so feel free to take a couple of seconds, minutes, how long you want to address the audience. We're officially done.
Thanks everyone for coming. And I didn't mention it, but I really want to thank you all too, for talking about Marine Monitor and sharing some incredibly interesting and great maps, and photos and things like that. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks again. It was really an amazing webinar. Lots of engagement. It's always a pleasure to see not only young scientists, I think we had even some senior scientists among us. So yes, thanks you once again for offering your expertise, your time, and we hope to have you in the future again in one of our next episodes.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Naomi. Thanks everyone.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would say we look forward to seeing you in one of the upcoming ECOP webinars, and have a nice day, nice evening, wherever you are. See you soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Naomi. See you.
Bye-bye.